You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Welcome, everybody. It's time for another Fire Ecology Chats. Today, we're going to be talking about an incredibly interesting paper in the realm of fire and social science. Fire and social science is what the journal Fire Ecology likes to look at as one of their special subject areas. And we have two people to talk about a paper that I think has recently been published that is really interesting. And the paper title is Wildfire Decision Support Tools, Theories and Facilitators, and Future Directions for Effectiveness. And we have Claire and Melanie here to talk about it. Claire, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Rapp. I'm a social scientist and research associate at the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute at Colorado State University.
Welcome, Claire. And Melanie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Bob. Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie Colavito. I am the Deputy Director and a social scientist at the Ecological Restoration Institute at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff.
Well, welcome, both of you. Thanks for spending some time with us and talking about this incredibly interesting paper. Claire, can you give us a little taste of what the paper's about?
In Wildfire, there are a lot of very complicated decisions that need to be made at all stages of fire management, from pre-fire to fire response to post-fire recovery. We can use technical information, data, models, etc., to try to make these decisions easier, more defensible, or more tractable to make. These sources of information can often be called decision support tools, and there's been a lot of interest in the effect of decision support tools on different parts of wildfire management. This interest has led a lot of people to ask the question, how are these tools being used by practitioners on the ground? In this paper, we're interested in the variety of ways that question has been asked, giving an overview and synthesizing the different studies that have looked at decision support tool use in the field and creating larger takeaways of what has come out of that literature.
Just so we're on the same page, Claire, what's exactly a decision support tool?
It's a very good question, and there's a lot of different ways to imagine a decision support tool. At the most basic, a decision support tool is a bit tautological. It's anything that supports decision making. However, we often want to think of them as computer-assisted software, for example, geospatial tools, models, dashboards, etc., that are supposed to help fire managers, fire practitioners, people in the wildfire space make decisions. What this means is that decision support tools are often a little bit more complicated than just a piece of information that can inform how you think about a fire problem. Some of them have a decision structuring component. They guide you through a stepwise procedure in order to make your decisions more consistent or defensible. They may also instead be tailored information sources. They may have a variety of pieces of information brought together in order to provide a one-stop shop for critical information for decision-making needs on wildfire. There are a variety of decision support tools, and they range significantly in how integrated they are, in the things that they can do, and the audience they're intended for.
Very interesting. And one other thing that's interesting about this paper is the methods. I'm always interested in social science about fire. Melanie, you want to talk a little about these methods?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And it's exciting to talk about social science with you. So when I think about science, I think about two primary types. One is primary research, where you're doing data collection and gathering information specifically from sources. And the other is secondary science, where you're taking a number of different bodies of literature or papers on a particular subject and looking at what they say collectively. This paper fits in the second. It's a secondary science approach, where we are looking at a bunch of papers that have social science methods that help us better understand how decision support tools are being used. This is different from other research in the decision support tool realm that has looked at the tools themselves. So what do the tools do? What are their quantitative models and methods? This is not that. This is looking at all the research that has examined how people are using them, what works, what doesn't work, and what we can do better. So we looked at all of the social science that have attempted to do this. That is a relatively limited data set. Actually, there are only a handful of papers in the peer-reviewed literature that have attempted to do this. So we supplemented those studies with gray literature, such as white papers and reports that have also done this, and collectively looked at what are all of these things saying together.
Well, Claire, a lot of the listeners of this podcast will want to know about the results, and the title mentions future directions. So can you tell us about the results and future directions?
A chunk of our results look at synthesizing the different barriers and facilitators to decision support tool adoption that these studies have found. A lot of these barriers and facilitators likely feel intuitive for a lot of the listeners to this podcast. A lack of capacity makes it more difficult to adopt tools. Cultures of innovation, cultures that reward seeking out tools and trying new things, are more likely to have individuals adopt them. These are intuitive, but it's helpful to be able to look across studies to see what have people found over and over again, what is coming to the surface as the key barriers and facilitators. But what we also looked at are use cases. I mentioned before that decision support tools vary a lot in the form that they take and the things they can do and are intended to do. Looking at the studies, we see that there's a couple use cases for decision support tools that seem to appear quite frequently. They can be used to document decisions, to make sure that we understand what was decided and what was the information that went into that. But they can also be used in ways that feel probably very intuitive to a lot of us. We can use them to get up to date on a changing landscape. We can use them to shape the messaging that we want and the stories we want to tell about our landscapes or about the things that we are doing during fire response. All of these are good uses, and I don't want to suggest that they are not a good way to use these tools, but our paper is increasingly interested in this idea of how can decision support tools improve the quality of decisions. To do that requires a slightly different lens, to ask what makes a high quality decision. What are the things that people tend to do that are associated with higher quality decisions? And the very big question, are our decision support tools helping people with these decision tasks? I won't get into the weeds, but it's a very rich potential avenue for future research as we start to ask questions of how do our decision support tools help us navigate complicated trade-offs? How do our decision support tools help us articulate what matters to us, where it is, and how at risk it is? And how do our decision support tools help us understand the potential consequences of actions we might take so that we can choose the actions that are best suited for the values that we care about?
That is one thing that the paper does very nicely, is it guides people in order to understand these decisions. So what are the implications to management then? Could you further expand on that?
Let me answer the question this way. Claire and I both work for a group of institutes called the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes, or SWERI. SWERI is designed to serve as a bridge between the research community and the management community working on wildfire risk reduction and forest restoration throughout the Intermountain West. So designing and developing information for managers and decision makers is part and parcel of everything that we do. So SWERI both develop these decision support tools at the table with management partners across the Intermountain West, as well as ask the second question about how well is this tool working for you? What are you doing with it? And what works, what doesn't work? What should we change? So we're there from the research initiation, the creation of the tool, to sticking around and helping implement the work that we have done together. And this paper helps us move the needle on that by really documenting things that we continue to hear. We've done a number of studies on specific decision support tools. We've done some synthesis work, but we keep seeing a lot of patterns. And so the point of this was to really say, are those patterns showing up in the literature? And if they are, then what can we do about them? Because I think if we keep seeing the same problem identified again and again, then that's where we want to be focusing our efforts. And so this paper goes exactly there to say, hey, a number of people have researched these topics and found these exact same types of issues. So whether you be a manager or you be an analyst developing a decision support tool, this is the area that we can focus on to move the needle, to get better, to make these tools really work for managers. So this is what that paper articulates, both for the management community and for the science community.
It's a wonderful review paper, and I thank you too for giving a review of the review paper. It's a wonderful paper, and I hope to see a lot of people read it. Melanie, would you like to recognize your co-authors of Funded Agencies?
We do want to recognize our co-authors because they have done the lion's share of the work. Claire, of course, who led this paper. Carissa Courtney, also at the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. Scott Franz at the Ecological Restoration Institute. Tyler Aldworth at the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. And Tony Chang, also at the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. This group of folks has worked really hard to better understand this, and this couldn't be done without support from the SWERI, the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institute Reshape team, which which is a larger effort we can talk about another time, but that's led by Erin Bull and Aidan Franco, both at the Ecological Restoration Institute, without whom this would not have been possible. In addition, I want to thank our funders. The Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes are funded in part through Congress as part of the 2004 Southwest Forest Health and Wildfire Prevention Act. So by that, we receive federal appropriations as well as funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which provided support for this work under the auspices of the Reshape program. And then we leverage funding sources at each institute with state and other in-kind grants that have collectively helped support this type of work.
Thank you both for dedicating your time to this and telling us about this wonderful paper. If you are interested, listeners, about this paper, you can download it for free. That's right, at no cost, because these people, Claire and Melanie, have already paid the freight for you to go ahead and download the paper. So please go to the Fire Ecology website and download this paper and find out a great review of social science stuff. I will tell you this is that Fire Ecology, the journal, loves fire social science, and they have a collection of wonderful associate editors that will review and evaluate and analyze every paper. So if you are a scientist or a student thinking about publishing a paper in social sciences, please think about fire ecology. And the rest of you, please tune in to the next Fire Ecology Chats.
Thank you for listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our show and leave us a review. To learn more about fire ecology and support our future work by becoming a member, visit fireecology.org. fireecology.org.